Once again, good morning. What a joyous day Christmas is. I think even before we who believe in Jesus and celebrate Christmas think about Christmas, all the Christmas things comes out in October in shopping malls. They tell you Christmas is around, right? And I think nowadays they're kind of fighting with Halloween. So Halloween has to finish and then Christmas decorations comes out in all the malls and the decorations and so on. But Christmas is definitely a time of the year everybody looks forward to. I know that there are non-Christian friends who look forward to Christmas because it can be because of its holiday and its environment, the music. It just gives you a different feel. I just wished it was not this hot, It'll be nice, when you say, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. At least 20 degrees will be fine. But here we are. It is a joyous day because Jesus was born for us. But as we talk about joy, there's so many other things crowding our minds even now. Just a week or so ago, a terrible tragedy took place in Sydney, in our nation. Too close for comfort. And everybody's talking about this Christmas is not going to be the same. But even more so, our own lives can create a level of tiredness. You can feel stretched. We can be very tired of all the shoppings and cookings, but you can also be tired of all the work you've done throughout the year. If you're like me, you're looking forward for some kind of a break at the end of the year. And if you have children, more so, school holidays, you want to take them out and so on. So you can be tired because of work. You can also be very distracted, right? In these days, we are very distracted people. I get onto the train to travel to the city for work or meeting, and the first thing I do is take out my phone. Then I look around, everybody else is holding their phone, and everybody's bowing down to the new god that they have, which is the media. And I tell myself, I cannot be doing this. Then I put my phone down and I realize I look like the creep looking at everybody else. Because everybody else seemed to be normal looking at their phones. I'm the only one looking at them looking at their phones. We can be a generation of people who are super distracted. But of course, at Christmas as well, we can be distracted by many other things than the real thing too. For those who are also preoccupied and stretched, remember, Christmas is not as simple and straightforward for many people today. There are people who are preoccupied with grief. There are people who are still in hospitals sick. There are still people working today and can't be with their families. There are so many people who are stretched and they do not have the ability to find some kind of release in their lives. But the message of Christmas doesn't change. It's not diluted or removed because we don't feel like it. Because Christmas, while it can be celebrated with many cultural experience, the celebration of the coming of Christ, the King, is applicable and relevant to wherever you are, in whatever situation you are. Even if you are grieving, you can still remember that Christ came. And He understands our grief. Christ did not just come for those who are rejoicing, but also for those who are in pain. So if you fit into one of those categories, tired, distracted, and you feel stretched, this message is a little bit for you this morning. The first Christmas, Mary and Joseph, the parents of Jesus, had to move from Nazareth to Bethlehem for the census. Now, I kind of did some research, and it says about 90 miles, 145 kilometers, give and take. And the terrain of the land in those days is not like a straight, clear highway, and there were no cars or airplanes to just get there in a few minutes. The journey with a pregnant woman would have taken easily a week or even more. It was a very difficult journey. And this is how Jesus came into the world. The journey was very tiring. We talk about tiredness. Mary and Joseph were very tired. And then they go to Joseph's hometown, Bethlehem. And what happened there? In Luke chapter 2, we heard this morning, verse 1 to 6. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. Can you imagine that? If somebody's going to give birth in this day and age, we make plenty of preparations ahead of time. But here, we see they were traveling so far through all this treacherous terrain and arrive at a place which is so busy, crowded, because people are coming from all over the places for the census. And here, suddenly Mary has to give birth, and they couldn't find a place. There was no room for the Messiah to be born. Now, this is not a mistake, right? Because the coming of the Messiah has been foretold by the prophets in the Old Testament. This is not a sudden decision, an accidental arriving of the Messiah. This was very well planned. God had planned this and foretold this hundreds and hundreds of years before. And so we see here that this is happening even though it was pre-planned. And you wonder why. And it was crowded. It was busy. There was no room for Jesus to be born. Jesus was not born with a great welcome party. I'm sure some of the Christmas celebrations and parties we have today will be very unrecognizable to Mary and Joseph. This one year, one Christmas, I read out what we call a kind of fiction letter of Mary and Joseph having this conversation about what are they doing? And one of them says, oh, they're celebrating the birth of our son Jesus. And one of Mary says, really? But why didn't they invite our son to his own birthday? And why are they giving themselves gifts and not giving to the person who's celebrating their birthday? And sometimes it can be like that. And at the first Christmas, it was like that. Jesus was not welcomed with a great fanfare, even though the Messiah, his coming was foretold. He was welcomed into this world with a very disappointing phrase. There is no room. There is no room. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, but there was no room. The census seemed to have disrupted everybody's life. Bethlehem was overcrowded. People were simply coping with what was demanded of them. They had no time to overthink anything that was happening around them. Busyness can also create no room. But God doesn't wait for everything to be settled. Luke 2:7, she laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the guest room. Jesus was still born, even though there was no room, even though there was no preparation. God did not wait for his son to be born when everyone was ready, when the time was ready, when all the preparations were made. His plan has to go on. God does not delay salvation until conditions are ideal for us today. His work to save us has to be done. Christ, the Messiah, has to be born. Jesus was born anyway. The event was not postponed. It was not rescheduled. He came when nobody was prepared. Galatians 4, verse 4. When the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son. In God's time, it was the fullness of time. It was his time. Even though the world was not ready, God had already planned for him to come. He was not accommodated. He was not received. But Jesus embraced humility. He took the form of a human being. He left all his glory in heaven, and he humbled himself. He became flesh. The Word became flesh. John chapter 1, verse 14. And dwelt among us. Emmanuel, God with us. He humbled himself to take our form. God enters the world as it is. not as we wish it were. Christ came while we were not ready for him. He came when it was the right time. The gospel, the good news of Jesus, is not what we made room for. The good news of Jesus is not about when we are ready, when we have got all our ducks in a row for God, or that we are prepared. God came when there was no room, when we were not prepared. Romans 5:8, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. The salvation of Jesus, the good news of Christ, was brought to this world while we were not ready, while we were still sinners, when we didn't have our ducks in a row yet. And we must remember that is the gospel. All we need to do today, you might be tired, you might feel distracted, you might feel stretched, you might feel you are not ready for God because there's so many things happening in your life right now. But this message this morning tells us, receive him now. In the midst of your busyness, in the midst of your distractions, don't try to get everything ready, prepared. It will never happen. Life is not in our hands. We are not in control of our lives. You know that. We have so many plans, but what happens is beyond us. So you can't wait for it to be ready. So pause, stop, believe in him, and receive him now, in the midst of your busyness, in the midst of your distraction. Give whatever room, time that you have, so that he may come and bring life. When he brings life, then suddenly you will realize all that busyness, all the tiredness, all the distractions become shadows in the light of Christ. When it becomes clear and apparent, you'll be thinking, why didn't I just make room and just put everything aside and let him come in anyway? But you need for Christ to come in for you to be able to see that. So don't try to see before he comes. Let him come. Then you will be able to see. And so this Christmas, my friends, wherever you are in your state of mind, if you have not received Jesus, if you have not welcomed him into your life, I urge you to pause this moment, because so many busy things are waiting for you when you go home, right? Children rushing to the Christmas tree, and families gathering for lunches and dinners, and phone calls and WhatsApp messages to answer. And this morning when I woke up, I told my wife, I'm very afraid to look at my phone because there are other parts of the world where they have already started celebrating Christmas, right? I don't want to answer all these messages now. So you might have to do all these things. Leave them for later. Right now, pause and say, Lord, come. Come into my life. I want to believe you. Let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, we thank you for coming not when everything was ready or when we were ready, not when there was space and welcome, but when there was no room at all. We thank you that you were not turned away and that you did not turn away from us. We praise you for your humility, that you took flesh, shared our weakness, and entered the ordinary precious of human life for our sake and for our salvation. Thank you that you make room for us in the mercy of God, in forgiveness that we do not earn, and in grace we cannot create for ourselves. As we celebrate Christmas today, help us to rest in what you have done, to receive your gift with gratitude, and to rejoice that you are Emmanuel, God with us. I pray for all who are gathered here this morning, that the good news of Jesus will remain in our hearts and minds as we celebrate this joyous day with all our loved ones. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.